I'm Wendy Miller. I'm 34 years old. 45 weeks ago, I packed my chef knives into a black suitcase and flew 6,800 kilometers from Charlotte, North Carolina to Hawaii. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell a single person in my family. I just vanished. I kept my phone number, same one I'd always used. If anyone wanted to reach me, they could, but their egos were too massive to admit I was gone. They thought I was throwing a childish tantrum and would eventually come crawling back to serve them. For 45 weeks, not one of them called. Not on Christmas, not on my birthday, not once until my sister showed up at my empty apartment because she needed free catering for a party. That's when my mother fired off 116 furious texts in 5 days. Not one of them asked if I was alive. Every single one screamed about what a greedy traitor I am. I didn't text back. I mailed one metal briefcase. And when they opened it, my relatives didn't come after me. They completely destroyed each other. Before I tell you how this exploded, please take a moment to like and subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it? I'd love to know. To understand how I got to this breaking point, we need to look back. Not to a teenager making boxed macaroni, but to a 12-year-old girl in a black dress. My sweet grandmother had just passed away. The house smelled like stale lilies, wet wool coats, and heavy grief. My mother Joanne sat in the center of the living room, dramatically sobbing and soaking up everyone's sympathy. My younger sister Chloe, who was 8, was happily playing games on a bright tablet in the corner. And me? I was in the hot, cramped kitchen, standing on a wooden step stool, stirring a massive pot of heavy beef stew for 40 hungry relatives. No one asked if I was sad. No one asked if I wanted to cry. I was just expected to feed everyone. That afternoon, Great Aunt Matilda, my grandmother's older sister, walked into the kitchen. She was a tall woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and hands that showed years of hard work. She saw me sweating over the stove, took the heavy wooden spoon from my blistered fingers, and pulled me into a tight hug. "You are not their personal maid, Wendy," she whispered fiercely into my hair. That moment forged an unbreakable bond between us. 10 years later, when I was 22 years old and drowning in $45,000 of culinary school debt, it was Great Aunt Matilda who secretly paid off every single penny because my mother flat out refused to help me. Fast forward to the present day. I was running a successful boutique catering business. I was a master of flavors, organized, and deeply passionate about food. But inside my family circle, my professional skills were just something for them to exploit. Instead of a color-coded calendar of doctor visits, my life was a nightmare of free catering demands. Just last week, Joanne forced me to cook an extravagant 5-course French dinner for her weekly book club of 15 women. I spent $300 of my own money on ingredients. When I served the meal, my mother didn't say thank you. Instead, she loudly complained in front of her friends that the roasted duck was 5 minutes late. 3 days later, Chloe dropped her 3 screaming kids at my house with zero notice, demanding I watch them while also forcing me to bake 50 intricate hand-decorated cupcakes for her kids' school bake sale overnight. She needed them by 7 a.m. I stayed up all night, my back aching, piping buttercream flowers. When Chloe picked them up, she slapped her own name label on the boxes to take all the credit. Not a single "How are you, Wendy?" or "Thank you." But the absolute final straw happened on this specific rainy Wednesday night, leading into Thursday morning. Chloe's husband Dylan had a big promotion party at his corporate firm. Chloe volunteered me to cater the entire event for 100 people, completely for free. I spent 18 hours on my feet, chopping, grilling, plating, and serving. My ankles were swollen and my chef's coat was stained with sauce and sweat. When the party ended at midnight, Chloe handed me a trash bag. "Make sure you scrub the venue's kitchen before you leave, Wendy. Dylan and I are going out for drinks," she said, not even looking me in the eye. I drove home in the pouring rain, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Joanne. "Wendy, I need you to prep a brunch spread for me and my friends tomorrow by 9 a.m. Don't be late this time." I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but deep inside my chest, I felt a massive, heavy iron chain finally snap. The silence in my car was deafening. I realized I was pouring my blood, sweat, and money into a bottomless pit of greedy, toxic people who would gladly watch me work myself into a hospital bed if it meant they saved a few dollars. I walked into my apartment. It was exactly 3 a.m. I didn't go to sleep. I didn't hesitate. I pulled a large black suitcase from my closet and began throwing my clothes inside. I packed my favorite Japanese chef knives, my grandmother's recipe book, and nothing else. I opened my laptop and bought a one-way, non-refundable plane ticket to a small, quiet coastal town in Hawaii. I checked the map. It was exactly 6,800 kilometers away from my mother's toxic grip. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a goodbye text. I didn't scream or argue. I just zipped my bag, locked the door, and took a taxi to the airport in the freezing rain. The unpaid servant was dead. Little did I know, my sudden disappearance would soon trigger an explosive chain reaction that would tear their perfect, greedy little world to shreds. Stepping off the plane in Hawaii, the air felt entirely different. It didn't smell like bleach and resentment. It smelled like salt water, blooming hibiscus, and pure freedom. I rented a tiny sunlit studio apartment right on the beach and spent the first 3 days just listening to the rhythmic crashing of the waves. It felt like my soul was finally taking a deep breath after being suffocated for 34 years. I didn't change my phone number. I kept the same Charlotte area code. I wanted to see how long it would take for them to realize I was gone. For the first 14 days, my phone buzzed a few times, but it was never to check on my safety. On day 2, Chloe texted, "Where did you put the silver chafing dishes? Dylan can't find them." On day 5, Joanne texted, "I had to order a $30 pizza for my book club because you never showed up. Unbelievable. You owe me $30. I stared at the screen, my stomach tying into a cold, hard knot. Not a single "where are you?" Not one "are you safe?" Just anger that their free services had been interrupted. They willfully ignored my absence, choosing to believe I would naturally come to my senses and return to my place beneath their boots. After week 3, the texts completely stopped. The silence stretched out into a massive gaping hole. For 45 silent weeks, my existence was completely ignored by everyone. I didn't let the silence destroy me. Instead, I poured my energy into my craft. By week 6, I was hired as the executive chef at an upscale, bustling seaside grill called the Blue Orchid. The owner, a warm-hearted man named Keanu, tasted my signature mango-glazed mahi-mahi during my interview. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your food is pure art. Thank you for bringing your talent to my kitchen." I had to step into the walk-in freezer just to hide my tears. 5 words of genuine praise, more than my family had given me in my entire life. But Hawaii wasn't an instant fairy tale. I had to prove I wasn't the weak pushover I used to be. The restaurant's jealous sous chef, Kai, hated that I got the top job. One night after closing, I walked back into the kitchen and caught Kai red-handed. He was photographing my secret recipe book, trying to sell my signature golden coconut shrimp formula to a rival seaside grill. The old Wendy would have cried. The old Wendy would have forgiven him to avoid conflict. But the new Wendy didn't flinch. I snatched my book from his hands. Kai started sobbing, dropping to his knees, begging for a second chance, playing the ultimate victim, just like my mother. I looked down at him with eyes as cold as ice. "Pack your knives, you're fired," I said, completely emotionless. Keanu walked in right at that moment, witnessing the entire confrontation. He didn't intervene, he just watched me handle the betrayal with ruthless efficiency. That was the exact moment he realized I wasn't just a good cook, I was a fierce leader. And that's why, months later, he didn't just want me as his chef, he wanted me as his equal. When Christmas arrived, I didn't sit alone in the dark. I roasted a massive traditional Kahlua pork and hosted a sunset beach bonfire for my entire restaurant staff. We laughed, sang, and ate until we couldn't move. I checked my phone at midnight. The screen was black, not a single Merry Christmas from North Carolina. I later found out from Great Aunt Matilda that Joanne had completely canceled their family Christmas dinner because she refused to pay for a caterer, and Chloe burned a frozen turkey. They blamed me for ruining the holiday, even though I was 6,800 kilometers away. Speaking of Great Aunt Matilda, she was the only person who knew exactly where I was. In my 6th month in Hawaii, she secretly flew out to visit me for a week. She walked into my little beach apartment, took one look at my glowing, stress-free face, and smiled. "You finally look alive, Wendy," she said, her sharp eyes twinkling. But she didn't just come for a vacation. She brought something with her. She placed a heavy, silver-locked metal briefcase onto my kitchen counter. It hit the wood with a loud, heavy thud. "What is that?" I asked, wiping flour off my apron. "Insurance," Matilda replied, her voice dropping to a serious whisper. "I've been collecting documents for years, Wendy. I always knew Joanne was hiding something sinister, so I hired a private investigator. Financial records, secret loans, bank statements. Your mother and sister have been hiding terrible secrets from the rest of the family, secrets funded by your unpaid labor. We even tracked down Marcus, the bank notary who handled your mother's paperwork. He was suffocating in guilt and sang like a canary. When the time is right, we will use this. Keep it hidden. I shoved the heavy briefcase under my bed, shivering despite the tropical heat. I didn't want to think about it. I just wanted peace. But peace always has an expiration date. The bubble finally popped in week 45. Back in Charlotte, Chloe was obsessively planning her 10-year vow renewal ceremony. She wanted it to be the social event of the decade. She invited 150 people and rented an expensive ballroom. There was only one problem. Her budget was completely gone. She needed a massive 5-tier fondant cake, a live carving station, and a full seafood buffet. And she needed it 100% for free. So, she dialed the only number she ever used for free labor. Mine. My phone started ringing while I was grilling fresh shrimp at the Blue Orchid. I saw Chloe's name flash on the screen. My heart did a painful flip in my chest, but I ignored it. I shoved the phone deep into my apron pocket. It rang 3 more times. Then came the text. Need to go over the menu for my vow renewal. Call me ASAP. We're doing lobster. I didn't reply. I went back to cooking. When I didn't answer by the next morning, Chloe didn't get worried. She got annoyed. She drove her SUV over to my apartment in Charlotte, the apartment I hadn't lived in for almost a year. She marched up the stairs, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement, and pounded on the door. The door opened, but it wasn't me. It was Mr. Henderson, a grumpy 60-year-old retired mechanic who had moved in 10 months ago. "What do you want?" he barked, holding a wrench. Chloe stepped back, confused. "I'm looking for Wendy. Did she move to a different unit?" "Girl moved out nearly a year ago, packed her bags in the middle of the night. Now get off my porch," he grumbled, slamming the door in her face. I want you to pay very close attention to Chloe's reaction. Her sister had been missing for 45 weeks. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She didn't call the police to report a missing person. She pulled out her phone, called our mother, and shrieked, "Mom, Wendy moved. Who is going to cook the lobster for my vow renewal?" Her first thought wasn't about my safety. It was about her seafood buffet. That single phone call lit a match to a powder keg. Joanne does not handle losing control. Within 10 minutes, my phone absolutely exploded. I was sitting on the beach, watching the sunset, when the notifications started pouring in like a violent storm. Joanne didn't leave voicemails. She used texts to attack. 116 furious text messages and 29 missed calls flooded my screen over the next 5 days. I sat in the sand and read them, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from absolute disgust. Message 1. Where are you? Call me this instant. Message 14. Chloe's vow renewal is ruined because of your selfishness. Message 32. How dare you abandon your catering duties? You owe us your skills. Message 65. After I gave you life, you betray me like this. You are a traitorous, ungrateful child. Message 98. You are dead to me unless you get back here and cook for this wedding. Message 116. I am telling the whole family what a greedy, lazy monster you really are. I read every single one. Not one message asked, "Are you okay?" Every single word was about what I owed them, what they needed from me, and how my absence inconvenienced their luxurious plans. I locked my phone. I stood up, brushing the white sand off my jeans. I walked back into my apartment, got down on my knees, and reached under the bed. My fingers wrapped around the cold handle of the metal briefcase. I pulled it out into the light. I pulled out my phone and dialed Great Aunt Matilda's number. She answered on the second ring. "Auntie," I said, my voice cold, steady, and hard as stone. "They finally noticed I'm gone. Chloe wants free catering for her vow renewal." Matilda let out a sharp, dark laugh over the line. "Oh, is that so? Well then, my dear, I think it's finally time we send them a little gift in the mail." The game had completely changed. I wasn't just walking away anymore. I was going to blow their house of cards straight to the ground. While I sat peacefully in Hawaii, Chloe went into full panic mode back in North Carolina. Not because she missed me, but because her extravagant $20,000 vow renewal was crashing down without my free labor. To save face, she didn't just post a vague, sad Facebook status. She launched a fraudulent GoFundMe campaign and went live on Instagram to play the ultimate victim. She squeezed out fake tears for the camera, wiping her perfectly dry eyes with a $40 lace handkerchief. She boldly lied to hundreds of people, claiming I had stolen the catering budget and vanished, begging her friends to donate so her dream day wouldn't be ruined. Within 24 hours, she had successfully scammed $3,500 from sympathetic neighbors and church members. But Dylan, her quiet husband, wasn't buying her victim act anymore. That Sunday, Dylan was driving Chloe's white luxury SUV when his phone loudly buzzed through the Bluetooth speakers. It was an urgent fraud alert call from their joint credit card company. The representative asked to verify a string of massive over-the-limit purchases. Confused, Dylan pulled over, his hands shaking as he logged into their banking app. The catering budget wasn't stolen at all. Chloe had secretly blown $12,500 on 3 designer handbags and a luxury spa weekend for herself. Dylan sat in the hot car, sweat dripping down his neck, a sick feeling twisting his stomach. He realized his wife was a pathological liar and I was just her convenient scapegoat. He finally saw the ugly truth, but he was too much of a coward to confront her yet. Meanwhile, 6,800 kilometers away, I was sitting at my small bamboo dining table, staring at the open metal briefcase. I was on a secure video call with Great Aunt Matilda. We were going through the files she had gathered. The documents inside were absolutely explosive. There were unpaid tax notices from Joanne's business, records of secret bank accounts Chloe used to hide money from Dylan, and worst of all, a massive fraudulent loan agreement. Matilda held a yellowed piece of paper up to the webcam. Your mother took out an $85,000 second mortgage on her house 5 years ago, Wendy, and she forged your signature as the cosigner to get approved. She paid off Marcus, her old friend at the bank, to falsely notarize the documents. I have his signed written confession right here in this folder. My blood ran ice cold. The room started to spin. They hadn't just stolen my time, my energy, and my culinary skills. They had secretly chained me to their massive financial ruin. My own mother had committed felony fraud against me. That's why she always forced you to work for free, Matilda said, her voice sharp as broken glass. She needed you too exhausted, too busy, and too broke to ever run a credit check on yourself. I slammed my fist on the table, rattling my coffee mug. Any lingering sadness or guilt I had about leaving them completely vanished. It was instantly replaced by a white-hot, blinding fury. We mail it, I said, my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. We burn it all down. Joanne, completely unaware of the hurricane heading her way, sent me a manipulative peace offering email that very evening. The subject line read, "We forgive you." The body of the email was even worse than the subject. Wendy, we are willing to forgive your childish tantrum. If you fly back by the 10th and cook for the party, we will let you back into the family. Don't be stupid. It was the final nail in the coffin. After almost a year of silence, they still only saw me as a spatula, not a human being. I carefully placed the forged loan documents and Chloe's hidden credit card statements, which Matilda had paid a private investigator to track down, into the briefcase. On top of the stack of financial crimes, I placed a single white piece of paper. I wrote one sentence in thick red marker: I know everything. I snapped the heavy lid shut. I locked the metal clasps and set the combination to 0000. I didn't want them to struggle to open it. I wanted it to pop open easily, but I wanted the delivery to look incredibly intimidating. On the crisp morning of November 8th, I walked down to the tiny island post office. The tropical air smelled of coconut oil and rain. I slapped the box on the counter and paid $45.50 for overnight certified shipping straight to Joanne's house. I tracked the package on my phone as I walked back to the beach. It was perfectly scheduled to arrive right in the middle of their massive pre-wedding holiday gathering. The timer was set, the bomb was in the mail, and they had absolutely no idea. Back in Charlotte, Joanne's house was buzzing with an overwhelming smell of expensive perfume and roasted garlic. It was November 9th, the night of the massive pre-wedding gathering. The living room was heavily decorated with extravagant gold balloons and rented crystal chandeliers. Joanne had invited 45 extended family members and friends to celebrate Chloe, but really it was a stage for her to play the victim. Joanne stood in the center of the room and tapped a silver champagne flute to get everyone's attention. She gave a dramatic, fake tearful toast about her lost, runaway daughter. She even pointed to a QR code printed on the napkins, urging guests to scan it and donate to Chloe's GoFundMe so the wedding wouldn't be ruined by Wendy's selfishness. Cousin Sarah, who always loved gossip, was recording the entire speech on her phone. Chloe, wearing a custom silk dress, stood next to her mother, pretending to wipe her nose with a tissue. Everyone was buying the act. Dylan's wealthy mother, Eleanor Bennett, felt so bad for her daughter-in-law that she pulled out her designer purse. She handed Chloe a crisp $5,000 check right there in the living room, telling her it was for catering recovery. Dylan, aggressively gripping a glass of scotch, watched his wife take the money. He knew the truth about the designer bags. He felt acid burning in the back of his throat. He was almost crushing the glass in his hand, disgusted by the lies, but he still stayed silent. Right in the middle of Joanne's fake crying, the doorbell rang loudly. It was Gary, a veteran mail carrier with a thick white mustache. He stood on the porch holding the heavy metal briefcase wrapped in brown shipping paper. He refused to just leave it. He loudly demanded a signature in blue ink from Joanne herself. Joanne signed the slip, brought the heavy package inside, and placed it on the marble kitchen island. She didn't take it to another room. She wanted everyone to see. She held her hands up and proudly announced to the crowd, "See?" Wendy finally came to her senses. This must be a cash apology for ruining the wedding. What she didn't know was that Great Aunt Matilda, secretly watching via FaceTime on a hidden tablet propped up on the kitchen counter, was witnessing everything live. Joanne ripped the brown paper off. She saw the combination lock. Assuming it was a basic code, she rolled the numbers to 0000. There was a sudden, heavy pause. Then came the sharp click of the metal latches echoing in the silent room. She popped the lid open. Instead of stacks of cash or an apology letter, the first thing everyone saw was the single white paper written in thick red marker, "I know everything." Joanne's fake smile instantly melting into pure terror. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. She stared at the thick files beneath the note, realizing exactly what was inside. Suddenly, the room's temperature feeling like it dropped 20 degrees. Uncle Robert, Joanne's older brother and a retired loan officer, had stepped up right behind her to look at the money. He saw the official bank logos. Before Joanne could cover them up, Uncle Robert, snatching the paper from the top, pulled the files out. He started adjusting his reading glasses to look at the documents. Within 3 seconds, his face turning bright red with anger. He held up a yellowed document for the entire party to see. "Joanne, what is this $85,000 second mortgage?" he boomed, his deep voice shaking the walls. "And why is Wendy's signature on it? And what is this handwritten confession from Marcus the notary?" Robert roared, holding up the damning letter. "He admits to taking a bribe to fake Wendy's signature." Chloe gasping and dropping her champagne glass. It hit the ground, the glass shattering into dozens of pieces on the hardwood floor. The crowd froze. Eleanor Bennett, demanding to know where her $5,000 is going, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing at Chloe. The pressure in the room was suffocating. The web of lies was snapping all at once. Dylan finally snapping and stepping forward. He couldn't take the toxic secrets anymore. He pointed a shaking finger right at his wife. "She spent the wedding money on designer bags, Mom," he yelled. "Wendy didn't steal anything. Chloe lied to all of you." There was a massive, stunning silence. Then, the entire crowd gasping in collective shock. Panic set in. Joanne, desperately trying to slam the briefcase shut, lunged for the box. But she was too late. Uncle Robert, physically blocking her hands, pushed her back. He stared at the forged signature line on the bank document, realizing what his sister had done to her own daughter. He looked Joanne dead in the eyes and delivered the final devastating blow. "This is felony forgery, Joanne," he shouted. "The perfect family image wasn't just broken, it was completely destroyed. And I was 6,800 kilometers away, finally free." The chaos in Joanne's living room didn't just stop at a gasp, it exploded into a full-blown hurricane. Eleanor Bennett, lunging forward with her sharp acrylic nails, didn't just ask for her money back. She reached out, snatching the $5,000 check right out of Chloe's sweaty hand. Chloe, screaming in a high-pitched, panicked voice, reached for the paper, begging her wealthy mother-in-law to listen to her lies. But Eleanor, slapping Chloe's hand away with zero hesitation. "You are a disgrace to this family, and you are not seeing a penny of my money," Eleanor hissed, her eyes burning with pure disgust. Meanwhile, Uncle Robert wasn't done destroying the illusion. He dug deeper into the metal briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of bank withdrawal receipts, holding them up to the crystal chandeliers. His hands trembling with rage, he began reading the horrifying details out loud for all 45 guests to hear. "Joanne, you didn't just take out an $85,000 loan," Robert yelled, his voice echoing over the quiet, shocked crowd. "You spent $14,000 on a luxury Mediterranean cruise in 2023. He slammed one receipt onto the marble island, and another $9,500 on a facelift. The truth hit the room like a physical punch. Joanne, covering her ears and sobbing hysterically, sank down into one of the expensive rented chairs. Her expensive mascara running down her cheeks like thick black tar, she looked completely pathetic. The matriarch who had just demanded GoFundMe money was exposed as a common thief. Around the room, the 45 guests muttering in absolute disgust. People couldn't get out of the house fast enough. I could see them through Great Aunt Matilda's hidden iPad screen, people aggressively grabbing their coats from the hallway closet. To make matters worse, Cousin Sarah's phone camera still recording every single humiliating second. She didn't stop the live stream. Within minutes, the live video hitting 500 views from their local church community. Everyone in their social circle was watching the mighty Joanne and perfect Chloe fall from grace. Pastor Daniel, who was watching from the back, shaking his head in deep disappointment. He walked slowly over to my mother. "You have lost your way, Joanne," he whispered, his voice full of sadness. He didn't offer a prayer or a hug. Instead, he turned around, walking out the front door and letting it slam shut behind him. As the party completely emptied out, Dylan finally made his move. He had spent his whole life avoiding conflict, but the betrayal was too deep. Dylan, pushing past Chloe without a single word, walked toward the hallway. His face looking pale and completely exhausted, he turned back to his wife one last time. "I am taking the kids to my mother's house tonight," Dylan stated coldly. Chloe grabbing Dylan's arm and begging him to stay, her fake victim act fully dropping into real terror. But Dylan yanking his arm free with pure disgust. "Don't touch me, I'm calling a divorce lawyer on Monday," he declared. A few moments later, through the tablet's microphone, we heard the sound of Dylan's car tires screeching out of the driveway. He was gone, leaving Chloe collapsed on the front lawn in her ruined custom silk dress, screaming into the cold night air. The very next morning, at exactly 8 a.m., reality came knocking. A heavy rainstorm washing over Charlotte, matching the dark mood inside the house. The house smelling of stale champagne and failure. Joanne was completely alone. The doorbell rang. It was Uncle Robert, but he wasn't alone. Uncle Robert returning with a stern-looking man in a gray suit. Joanne opened the door, confused. It was Mr. Sterling, a ruthless corporate lawyer that Robert had known for years. Joanne, sitting on her couch, wearing a dirty bathrobe and shivering, looked like a cornered rat. Mr. Sterling, throwing a thick legal binder onto the coffee table, didn't bother with a polite greeting. "You committed identity theft against your own daughter, Joanne," Mr. Sterling said smoothly. Uncle Robert stood over his sister, his face hard as stone. "You have 48 hours to list this house for sale to pay off that $85,000 loan," Uncle Robert demanded. Joanne gasped, crying that she would be homeless. But Mr. Sterling wasn't finished. He pulled a second, older document from his briefcase. It was sealed with a faded red ribbon. "This," Mr. Sterling said coldly, "is your mother's original, unaltered will, the one you deliberately hid from probate court. According to this document, when Wendy turned 25, she was entitled to exactly 50% ownership of this property. You didn't just take out a fraudulent loan on her name. You stole her inheritance to fund your Mediterranean cruises." Joanne stopped breathing. The floor dropped out from under her. Robert didn't care. "If you refuse to sell and surrender Wendy's stolen equity immediately, I am personally marching down to the police station," he threatened. He leaned in close. "And you will be wearing handcuffs by Friday." As Joanne, hyperventilating, clutching her chest as her perfect world crumbled, my phone buzzed 6,800 kilometers away in Hawaii. It was Great Aunt Matilda texting me a single smiling face emoji from her hotel room. I sat on my sunny beach balcony, drinking hot ginger tea. The house of cards hadn't just fallen, it had completely burned to ashes. I didn't dance or throw a party. My heart felt a little heavy, but it was a clean, healthy kind of heavy, like a broken bone finally being set straight by a doctor. They were finally paying the price for the years of pain they caused me. The aftermath of the exploded briefcase didn't just break the family apart, it completely leveled their false reality. 48 hours after Mr. Sterling, the ruthless lawyer, delivered his ultimatum, Joanne was forced to face the harsh daylight of her own actions. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the cold, biting wind whipping her hair across her face. Joanne stood in her front yard. In her manicured hands she held a heavy steel hammer and a cheap metal for sale sign. Her beautiful, perfectly manicured green lawn, the one I used to mow for free every single Saturday, was about to become the symbol of her absolute ruin. She swung the hammer down. Thwack. Every single neighbor on the street was outside, pretending to water their plants or check their mail. In reality, they were watching the mighty Joanne Miller lose her kingdom. From her front porch, Mrs. Peterson, slowly shaking her head in pity, took a long sip of her coffee. She didn't wave. She didn't offer a casserole. Joanne felt a heavy, suffocating knot of shame in her throat. For the first time in her life, she realized that without my unpaid labor and stolen credit, she was absolutely nothing. Across town, Chloe was experiencing her own terrifying reality check. Because Dylan had legally frozen all their joint bank accounts and taken the kids to his mother's, Chloe was completely cut off from the luxury she felt entitled to. Her platinum credit cards were declined. Her GoFundMe was reported for fraud and shut down. Desperate for cash, Chloe walked into the Greasy Spoon Diner on 4th Street, a place she used to loudly mock for being trashy. The overwhelming smell of old frying oil and cheap bleach hit her like a brick wall. She walked up to the manager's counter, handing over a crumpled, poorly written resume she had printed at the local library. Chloe, nervously biting her perfectly manicured nails, waited for the manager to speak. He looked her up and down, unimpressed by her designer clothes. "I can offer you the night shift cleaning tables. It pays a minimum wage of exactly $11.50 an hour," the manager grunted. Chloe, holding back tears of total humiliation, simply nodded. The princess who demanded a $20,000 vow renewal was now going to be wiping up spilled ketchup to survive. The social consequences were even faster than the financial ones. When Joanne dragged herself back inside her empty house, she found an envelope stuck in her doorframe. It was printed on the crisp, heavy paper of the church stationery. Joanne tore it open. It was an official letter from Pastor Daniel. The church elders had held an emergency meeting because of the public exposure of her $85,000 felony forgery. Joanne was permanently expelled from the prestigious Grace Charity Board. Her hands shaking so hard she drops the letter onto the carpet. The one thing Joanne loved more than money was her wholly perfect reputation. Now it was shredded into a million unfixable pieces. She tried to call Chloe for comfort, but the phone just rang and rang. They were too busy blaming each other to actually support one another. Chloe blamed Joanne for raising her to be greedy. Joanne blamed Chloe for being careless with the GoFundMe. They were drowning, and instead of swimming, they were dragging each other down. While they sank, I was finally learning how to fly. Exactly 6,800 kilometers away, I was standing in the bright, busy kitchen of the Blue Orchid in Hawaii. The vibrant smell of toasted coconut and fresh lemongrass filled the warm air. I was plating my signature dish when Keanu, the restaurant owner, walked in holding a sleek black folder. He waited until the dinner rush was over. Then, he asked me to sit down at a quiet corner table overlooking the moonlit ocean. "Wendy," Keanu said, his voice thick with genuine respect, "since you took over my kitchen, our reviews have skyrocketed. You brought in $50,000 in extra revenue just this month." He slid the folder across the table. "This is a legal partnership contract. I want to give you a 20% profit-sharing stake in the restaurant. I want you to be my business partner." I stared at the paperwork. For 34 years, my own flesh and blood had treated me like a broken vending machine, kicking me until I gave them what they wanted for free. Now a man who had only known me for a few months was handing me the keys to a thriving business because he valued my worth. Wendy's eyes filling with warm, happy tears, I reached out and signed the paper. It was the first signature I had ever made that wasn't stolen from me. Later that night, my phone buzzed on my nightstand. It was Great Aunt Matilda, her voice sounding like a proud, fierce general. She gave me the final update on the chaos back east. "Your mother listed the house. Chloe is scrubbing tables," Matilda reported with grim satisfaction. "But listen to me carefully, Wendy. When toxic people hit rock bottom, they always try to drag their favorite victim down with them. The begging and the crying are going to start soon. They are going to try and guilt you into saving them." I walked out onto my balcony, feeling the cool ocean breeze on my face. A deep, powerful sense of inner peace settling over my chest. "They can try," I whispered into the phone, "but they don't have a daughter or sister anymore. They only have the consequences of their own actions." While Matilda stayed on the line, I opened my phone settings. I found Joanne's contact. I found Chloe's contact. Pressing the block caller button with a deeply satisfying click, I permanently severed the invisible chains that had held me down my entire life. There was no turning back now. The storm in North Carolina was raging, but my sky was perfectly clear. On a freezing Tuesday at exactly 3 p.m., 2 weeks after the lawyer's visit, desperation completely took over. Joanne had always believed she could charm or bully her way out of any consequence. She drove her luxury sedan to Great Aunt Matilda's massive historic stone house. Joanne marched up the grand brick steps, her designer boots clicking, and rang the heavy brass bell. When Matilda opened the door, Joanne immediately burst into fake tears, clutching her expensive silk scarf. "Matilda, you have to write me a check. They are taking my house over that silly little $85,000 loan." Great Aunt Matilda didn't even blink, her face as hard and cold as carved marble. She looked at her greedy younger sister. She didn't invite Joanne inside. Instead, Matilda reached into her pocket and handed Joanne a cheap, thin yellow notepad. "What is this?" Joanne asked, her voice trembling with confused rage. "It is a strict monthly budget plan," Matilda said sharply. "It shows you how to live on a fixed income. I will not give you a single penny to cover up the felony you committed against Wendy. Now get off my porch before I call the police for trespassing." Matilda slammed the heavy oak door. Joanne stood there, the icy wind biting through her thin designer coat, finally realizing she had no more victims left to drain. Things were even worse for Chloe. Working at the diner was breaking her spirit, but she still hadn't learned her lesson. Late Friday night, under the harsh, buzzing neon open sign, the diner was mostly empty. Chloe was wiping down a sticky booth when she noticed the plastic tip jar sitting near the cash register. It was full of $1 bills and quarters from the evening rush. Thinking no one was looking, Chloe, slipping her greasy hand into the jar, pulled out a handful of cash. It was exactly $42 in crumpled bills. She desperately wanted to buy a fancy coffee to feel rich again. "Put it back," a gruff voice barked. It was the manager, standing right behind her, his arms crossed tightly over his stained apron. Chloe, dropping the money like it was on fire, stumbled backward. The coin scattered loudly across the dirty tile floor. "I wasn't stealing, I was just organizing it," she lied, her face flushing a deep, ugly red. "If you ever touch the tip jar again, I won't just fire you. I will have you arrested for theft," he growled. He pointed a thick, angry finger toward the mop bucket. "Now mop the kitchen." Chloe grabbed the dirty mop, hot tears of absolute shame burning her eyes. The former princess was officially a thief working for pennies. Meanwhile, Dylan was trying to clean up the massive mess his silence had helped create. Because I had blocked Chloe and Joanne, Dylan reached out to Great Aunt Matilda to ask if I would be willing to speak with him. I agreed, but only on my terms. On Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Hawaii time, I sat on my sunny balcony and opened my laptop. Dylan's face appeared on the screen. He looked completely different. Dark, heavy bags hung under his tired eyes, and he was sitting in a bare, empty hotel room. "Wendy," he started, his voice thick with genuine regret. "I am so sorry. I knew Chloe was treating you like a servant. I knew she lied. And I just stood there because I was a coward. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it." I took a slow sip of my sweet iced guava tea. "Thank you for saying that, Dylan. But an apology without change is just a manipulation." "I am changing," Dylan replied firmly. He leaned closer to the webcam, his jaw set with determination. "I filed the divorce papers yesterday, and I am fighting for 100% full custody of the kids. Chloe is too unstable and toxic to raise them." A wave of relief washed over me. The kids were finally going to be safe from Chloe's terrible influence. "Protect them, Dylan," I said softly. We ended the call respectfully. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a step toward truth. By the end of the month, Joanne's perfect world officially collapsed. Her beautiful house was sold at a massive loss to pay off the bank fraud. On a gloomy gray Wednesday, she packed her few remaining clothes into trash bags. She had to move into a tiny, rundown $850 a month apartment on the bad side of town. The place smelled like cheap pine cleaner and stale cigarette smoke. There was no crystal chandelier. There was no green lawn, just a loud, rattling window AC unit and a lonely, empty room. But 6,800 kilometers away, my life was blooming. I was standing in the packed dining room of the Blue Orchid. It was the grand launch of my brand new signature menu. The restaurant was buzzing with laughter, and the rich, mouth-watering aroma of garlic butter and grilled lobster. Keanu handed me a menu fresh from the printer. Right at the top, listed as our premium appetizer, was Matilda's golden coconut shrimp. I had named my best dish after the woman who saved my life. I traced the letters with my finger, my heart swelling with a deep, unbreakable joy. The toxic chains were gone. I was finally writing my own recipe for happiness. Even after everything had collapsed, toxic people never truly surrender without pulling one last desperate trick. On a freezing Sunday night, Joanne decided to play her ultimate manipulation card. Since I had blocked her number, she knew she needed extreme measures to get my attention. Joanne, laying on her cheap linoleum floor, decided to fake a massive emergency. She actually called an ambulance, faking a dramatic medical crisis for attention, just to get inside a hospital room. She convinced a sympathetic nurse to text me a blurry photo of a hospital heart monitor with a message saying my mother might not make it through the night. When that photo popped up on my phone, her heart initially skipping a frightened beat, the natural instinct of a daughter flared up. But before I rushed to the airport, I called Great Aunt Matilda. I should have known better. Matilda, hacking into her vast network of local doctor friends, made a few discreet phone calls. Within 20 minutes, Matilda called me back with a dry, humorless laugh. Joanne didn't have a heart attack. It was just a mild case of indigestion from eating too much cheap canned soup because she refused to learn how to cook for herself. A cold wave of absolute disgust washing over her, I realized my mother would gladly use the threat of her own death just to regain control over my life. I didn't reply to the nurse, I just deleted the picture. 2 days later, Chloe tried her own sneak attack. Since her cell phone plan had been shut off by Dylan, she used the greasy black landline phone at the diner's kitchen to call the restaurant in Hawaii. Keanu handed me the phone, looking concerned. "Wendy, please don't hang up," Chloe cried, the fluorescent diner lights flickering above her head. Chloe's voice cracking with desperate, ugly sobs, she launched into her pitch. "Dylan is taking the kids from me. He has a ruthless lawyer. I need you to wire me the money. I am begging for a $10,000 divorce attorney. You're rich now, you have to help your sister." I stood in my beautiful, clean kitchen, the smell of fresh-baked bread wafting through the dining room. I thought about the $12,500 she stole for designer bags while expecting me to cater her party for free. Grasping her silver chef's knife tightly, I spoke into the receiver with a perfectly calm, flat voice. "You made your bed, Chloe." Her knuckles turning white as she gripped the phone cord, Chloe shrieked into the phone. "You are a heartless monster," she screamed, right before slamming the phone down. I handed the receiver back to Keanu, feeling a massive weight lift off her shoulders. I wasn't a monster. I was just finally immune to their poison. That afternoon, I decided it was time to lock the door forever. I didn't write an emotional email or a tearful letter. I sat down with Mr. Tanaka, a sharp-suited business lawyer that Keanu used for the restaurant. Together, we drafted a formal cease and desist order printed on thick legal watermark paper. The document legally barred Joanne and Chloe from ever contacting me, my staff, or coming within 500 feet of the Blue Orchid. Wendy signing the document with a heavy gold fountain pen, I felt a profound sense of closure. The letters were shipped overnight in a heavy official envelope marked Urgent Legal Notice. When Joanne received her copy, she didn't cry. She went into a state of total denial. Hungry and refusing to accept her new poverty, she walked into the upscale organic market she used to rule. She filled her shopping cart with expensive imported cheeses and organic wines, acting like she still had the $85,000 she stole from me. When she reached the register, her debit card was instantly declined. Panicking, she tried to hand the teenage cashier her expired VIP Platinum loyalty card. When the cashier politely explained she needed actual money, Joanne completely snapped. Joanne, throwing a massive, screaming temper tantrum in the checkout lane, began waving her arms wildly. She accidentally knocked over a beautiful display of glass olive oil bottles, shattering them everywhere. The manager had to physically escort her out of the store, banning her for life. A sharp pain of realization piercing Joanne's chest, she finally understood she was a nobody. Joanne, walking back to her tiny apartment in the freezing rain, slipped quietly into the deafening silence of Joanne's empty, cold apartment. But while they were trapped in the bitter winter of their own making, my life was bathed in the warm Hawaiian sun setting over the turquoise water. It was Thanksgiving Day. I didn't sit in a dark apartment eating canned cranberry sauce. Keanu and I opened the Blue Orchid for a massive, free community charity feast to feed the local homeless and elderly. The air was filled with laughter and the smell of roasted sweet potatoes, rich gravy, and ocean salt. And to my absolute shock, Great Aunt Matilda walked through the front doors, wearing a bright floral Hawaiian shirt and a huge smile. She had flown across the ocean just to spend the holiday with me. Matilda, wrapping a strong, comforting arm around Wendy's shoulder, guided me to the front of the dining room. Keanu tapped a glass for attention. He unveiled a surprise present for me, a beautiful hand-painted wooden sign with Wendy's name on it, officially welcoming me as a co-owner. Raising a glass of sparkling apple cider, I looked out at the room full of smiling, happy people who actually cared about me. Tears of pure gratitude shining in her eyes, I finally took a deep, shaky breath. I had lost a toxic family, but I had built a beautiful, unbreakable one in its place. The consequences of the exploded briefcase were no longer just a family scandal. They became permanent legal reality. On a freezing Tuesday morning at exactly 9 a.m., Chloe faced the hardest consequence of her entire life. She was sitting in the stuffy, wood-paneled family courtroom 3B, wearing a wrinkled blouse she had bought at a thrift store. Dylan's lawyer presented the absolute truth. Judge Harper, a stern woman with sharp silver hair, sat high on her bench, glaring over her thick reading glasses. She looked down at a massive stack of $12,500 designer bag receipts and the police report from Chloe's attempted tip jar theft. Slamming her heavy wooden gavel with a loud final crack, the judge delivered her ruling. Dylan was granted 100% full legal custody of the 3 children. Chloe, violently sobbing into her cheap paper tissues, realized her fake victim act didn't work in a court of law. To make matters worse, the judge ordered Chloe to pay $600 a month in child support, money she absolutely did not have. Chloe, walking miles in the freezing sleet to get back to her tiny rented room, finally felt the crushing weight of her own lies. Joanne wasn't doing any better. With her house gone and her bank accounts empty from paying off the fraud, she was desperate for cash to pay her electric bill. She walked into Gold and Silver Pawn on 8th Avenue, a dark, dingy shop. The overwhelming smell of old dust and stale cigarettes made her cough. She proudly slapped her favorite piece of jewelry onto the glass counter, her supposed diamond tennis bracelet she had bragged about for 20 years. The pawnbroker, a grumpy man with a thick beard, picked it up, sliding a magnifying glass over his eye. He dropped it back onto the counter. "I'll give you $15 for it. It's cheap cubic zirconia worth exactly $15. Her jaw dropping in absolute horror, Joanne realized her entire life had been a fake, cheap imitation. Just like the fake diamonds, her perfect image was completely worthless when put under a real microscope. Joanne, staring blankly at her cracked apartment ceiling that night, finally understood that she had traded her brilliant, hard-working daughter for a handful of fake glass. The 2 villains of this story finally collided. Late Thursday night at a fluorescent-lit laundromat, Joanne and Chloe ran into each other. The place was miserable, smelling strongly of cheap detergent and damp mildew. They were both fighting over a broken washing machine leaking soapy water onto the dirty tile. Instead of hugging or supporting each other, they exploded. "You ruined my life," Chloe screamed, her voice echoing over the deafening hum of the drying machines. "If you hadn't forged that loan, Wendy would still be here catering my events." Joanne, crossing her arms in bitter disgust, fired right back. Chloe, furiously throwing a wet towel at her mother, stormed out into the rain. That was the last time they ever spoke to each other. Their toxic alliance was permanently broken. Meanwhile, 6,800 kilometers away in my sunlit Hawaiian office, I was breathing in the sweet scent of fresh orchids and ocean mist. Keanu, my new business partner, practically kicked my door open, holding a fresh copy of the Pacific Culinary Weekly magazine. He threw it onto my desk, grinning from ear to ear. I opened the glossy cover. There, on page 12, was a full-page glossy photo of my golden coconut shrimp. The headline above it read, "The island's most brilliant rising chef." Running my fingers over the shiny magazine page, I felt a tear slip down my cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was pure, overwhelming validation. I wasn't just a free kitchen maid anymore. I was a respected, celebrated executive chef. A few days later, the final piece of the puzzle arrived. I heard a knock at my door and found a thick manila envelope arriving in the mail. The return address was Dylan's. I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter on crisp white paper and a printed photograph of the kids wearing bright yellow raincoats. They were laughing together in a beautiful green park, looking happier and healthier than I had seen them in years. I read Dylan's letter. "We won the case today, Wendy," Dylan wrote. "He didn't ask me for money. He didn't beg me to come visit. He just wanted to share the good news. Thank you for being the wake-up call I desperately needed." Pinning the photo to my corkboard with a blue thumbtack, I smiled. I listened to the booming sound of the Hawaiian surf outside my window. I felt a warm, glowing feeling of absolute peace. My family didn't break because I left. They broke because I finally stopped letting them use me as the glue for their toxic, broken pieces. Finally, I was entirely the author of my own life. 1 year later, on a balmy Friday evening, the scales of justice had completely balanced themselves. Back in North Carolina, my mother Joanne was experiencing a life she had once cruelly mocked. To pay off the massive legal fees and remaining debt from her $85,000 fraud, she had to get a minimum wage job. She was standing under the fluorescent lights of the bargain bin discount store, working as a front door greeter. She was wearing a cheap red polyester vest over her faded clothes. A customer walked in carrying a set of high-end chef knives. Joanne stared at the knives, feeling a sharp, agonizing stab of regret in her chest. Her hands shook. She finally realized she had traded a loving, brilliant daughter for a handful of lies. Now she was completely alone, saying welcome to strangers who didn't even look at her. Across town, Chloe was living in a tiny, cramped $700 a month studio apartment. It was her designated weekend to have the kids. She tried to cook them a simple grilled cheese sandwich, something I used to make perfectly for them in 5 minutes. Instead, the kitchen filled with the smell of burned bread and melted plastic. Thick black smoke billowing from her rusty toaster. Chloe coughed and desperately waved a towel in the air. The sandwich was completely ruined as a blackened crisp. She sank to the sticky kitchen floor, wiping away bitter tears of utter defeat. The former spoiled princess couldn't even feed her own children. She finally understood the incredible value of the thousands of meals I had cooked for her family for free. While they faced their bitter reality, my world was shifting in a much more beautiful, bittersweet way. At precisely 11:45 p.m. on a quiet Tuesday, my incredible great-aunt Matilda passed away. She wasn't in pain. She was surrounded by beautiful white orchids and classical music, softly passing away peacefully in her sleep at age 82. A few weeks later, I received a heavy, wax-sealed legal envelope in the mail. Matilda had left everything to me. I was officially inheriting the massive $2.5 million historic stone house, and combined with the massive check I legally recovered from the forced sale of Joanne's stolen house, I had a fortune. But I didn't want to go back to Charlotte. I didn't want the house. So, I made a choice that would make her proud. I ended up selling the property and using the recovered inheritance funds to fund a culinary scholarship for young women who were struggling with debt, beautifully honoring the woman who secretly saved her life. Then came the moment that truly melted my heart and healed my soul. It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning. I was standing in the bright, bustling Honolulu International Airport. I was anxiously holding a welcome sign. Suddenly, Dylan walked through the arrival gates with his 3 kids. They were all wearing matching bright blue floral shirts. Layla, Miles, and Owen stopped dead in their tracks when they saw me. Dropping their heavy suitcases on the shining terminal floor, they started running. They came sprinting into my open arms with joyful screams. "Auntie Wendy!" little Owen cried, wrapping his small arms tightly around my neck. I fell to my knees right there in the airport, tears of absolute joy spilling freely down my face. I was burying my face in their soft hair, breathing in their sweet scent. I hadn't seen them in nearly 2 years. Dylan stood back, smiling warmly with tears in his own eyes. That night, I didn't cater a stressful, ungrateful corporate party. Instead, I hosted a massive, crackling beach bonfire under the starry sky just for my true family. I was grilling fresh, buttery lobster tails and sweet pineapple over the open flames. I listened to the sound of children's laughter mixing with the crashing waves. As I watched Layla teach Keanu how to make a s'more, I felt a warm, glowing feeling of complete family love. This was my chosen family. This was real. Fast forward 2 months. I was standing outside on the patio for the grand opening of our second seaside restaurant. The local mayor was there. I was holding a pair of heavy scissors, cutting a thick red silk ribbon with golden scissors. There was a crowd of 200 cheering locals clapping for us. My business partner, Keanu, raising a tall glass of sparkling champagne, gave a toast to our success. He walked over, placing a steady, supportive hand on my shoulder. "To Chef Wendy," he smiled, "the heart of our kitchen." I walked to the edge of the patio, looking out at the endless, glittering Pacific Ocean. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of sea salt and blooming jasmine. I thought about the girl who used to cry in her car in Charlotte. I thought about the 18-hour shifts, the stolen credit, the fake vow renewal, and the explosive metal briefcase. By stepping onto that airplane, I had learned the greatest lesson of my life, realizing my worth wasn't tied to a kitchen stove in Charlotte. I had built a deep, unbreakable sense of self-respect. I survived by leaving behind the heavy chains of financial abuse. I finally proved to myself that I wasn't just a free catering machine. I was a human being. I was an artist. My life was a masterpiece of my own making. If you are the person in your family who gives and gives until you are entirely empty, if you are the one carrying everyone else's heavy burdens while they ignore yours, hear me now. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to pack your bags, protect your peace, and start over. There is a beautiful warm light waiting for you the moment you decide you are worth more than the services you provide. By stepping out of the dark shadows of toxic guilt, you can finally find your true self. I am so deeply grateful for the chance to be sharing this powerful journey of breaking free with you today. If my story resonated with your heart, if you felt the pain of those invisible chains and the absolute triumph of finally letting them go, please consider staying a while. You can help ensure stories of survival and deep emotional truth reach others who desperately need to hear them by clicking the like button and subscribing to this channel. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in my journey. And remember, your peace is always worth the price of walking away.